Good morning, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Innovative Finance. My name is Esther Magyarosi, and I'm Head of Innovative Finance at the Clay World Secretariat. I will be moderating this webinar for you today. And before we get started, I would like to go over with you some technical items so that you know how to participate in today's event. So as you can see, you have been at the moment all automatically muted. And still you have the opportunity to submit text questions into the questions pane, which is in the control panel. And when we move to the group discussions, you will be, of course, unmuted. The chat box, please only use for technical questions. I also would like to inform you that this webinar will be recorded, and the recording file will be shared not much later after this webinar. So before starting, I also would like to say a few words about the agenda. The agenda for today includes presentations and also group discussions. After the opening remarks, we will have a very exciting knowledge product launch, and this will be followed by the presentation of different innovative financing tools. After these presentations, we will break into 4 parallel groups, and this is the opportunity to ask your questions, to interact with the speakers. So as we really have a very packed agenda for today, I would kindly ask you, if possible, to keep your questions for these group discussions. We don't have any other dedicated Q&A sessions. So either use the question box or please, as much as possible, ask your questions in these group discussions. After the breakout groups, we will again be back to the plenary form, and then each group facilitator will report back on the outcomes of your group discussions. I think these are the most important technicalities I wanted to go through with you. And not to take too much time, let me give the floor to our first speaker, Jean-François Beau, Executive Director of FMDV, to open this session on innovative finance. Jean-François, the floor is yours.
Can you hear me?
Now we can hear you, yes.
Okay, sorry. So thank you for inviting me to this great session, and I will try to introduce what are the key aspect of innovation in financing low carbon transition in cities. So first of all, on the context, there are some key points to understand around innovation in climate finance. The 2 first ones are that there is an infrastructure backlog in most of the cities. In developing and emerging context, there is a need to answer to the rapid urbanization. For example, in Africa, there is a need to build the equivalent of what has been built in China since the history of development of China. And this, Africa will need to develop these infrastructure by 2050. So there is a huge gap of infrastructure in those contexts, but also in developed context where there is a need to renew the infrastructure to a more low carbon approach and to be digitalized. So it is estimated that there is a need of 19 trillion USD to finance this gap in the next 15 years. But there is also a market failure on municipal finance, and more specifically in emerging and developing context. There is no connection between the demand side and the supply side. And this, despite a strong dynamic around the project preparation and the development of pipelines of projects, there is no mayors in the world that has no projects to propose to be financed. But on the other side, there is a strong interest also from the financial stakeholders to invest into the cities, whether they are donors or private investors, but the credit lines or the investment capacities they have are largely underspent. So we can see that on one side, there are a lot of projects and a lot of support to develop bankable projects, but on the other side, the investors cannot find the level of investment they would like on cities. So there is this market failures that is explained by many aspects, many reasons: the lack of capacities, the lack of data, the lack of maturity of the national markets, but also of the project itself, but also the lack of understanding from the investors and donors on how cities are, in which context cities are developing their programs. So for that reason, this is the crucial need of innovating in mobilizing additional resources in the city. So that's why this session is very exciting, to see how individual cities or stakeholders are developing innovation. But what is innovation in municipal finance? There is a French economist, Lavoisier, who said that nothing is created, but everything is transformed. And the second general statement is that financial engineering is endless until it is profitable. And we can see in the private finance sector that they develop many very complex transaction, complex models, and basically all of them could be adapted to the cities as soon as it's profitable. But then cities are not thinking in a profitability, but more in how can I deliver services and infrastructure to everyone, leaving no one behind. So on municipal finance, mainly the innovation consists in adapting existing models from other sectors, and mostly from the private finance, and this into the classic way to mobilize resources. So on debt and borrowing, on capital market, on private investment, I've mentioned some kind of what we call innovation, like off-balance sheets through SPV, like green bond and pool bonds, or equities or crowdfunding. This can be innovative in some context, but this is very classic in some cities. So that's where also the innovation is. It depends also on the context and what exists into the market that is being developed. So I would like to also to mention maybe some example in order to illustrate that. When we are talking about mobilizing private investment, the city of Paris, for example, has developed the Paris Green Fund, which is a fund that is managed by a private fund manager, but is raising fund to finance small SMEs that are contributing to the low carbon transition of the city of Paris. So city of Paris doesn't invest directly, but they're using this fund in order to support SMEs that are going into the climate direction set by the city of Paris. On the capital markets, some are developing pool financing mechanisms in order to allow secondary cities to access to the capital market. And individually, those cities couldn't access to the market, but because they are pooled in one unique transaction, it allows them to diversify and to access to a capital market. And this FMDV is currently working in South Africa to develop the first green pool bond with the South African cities. And there are a lot of examples in Europe with the local government funding agencies. On PPPs also, it's quite interesting to see that some cities are using smart solutions to lower the cost. So it's not accessing to new resources, but it's also to think how to make my services and my infrastructure cheaper than it actually costs. So we are working now in Kampala also on a water management project where we see that in some context there are leaks that represent almost 60% of the water that is managed, but with some smart solution and sensor that you put on the systems, you can see where the leaks come from, and it allows the city not to invest into the global process of water management, but just where the leaks are. So it's cheaper, and it avoids the city to pay for a service that they don't using. Also on energy efficiency, it's quite classic, but on public lighting, we are working with Nouakchott in order to change the public lighting systems with the LED system that is cheaper, and then with this money that is saved from this low carbon system, the city will be able to invest in new and larger public lighting system. Then also a third example on collaborative and participative approach. There is the city of Lisbon is developing the green participatory budget, and we are supporting them on that. It allows the city to connect the project that they want to finance with the choice of the citizens, and the citizens now are more clear on the way tax are used, and also are more sensitive about the climate action of the city. So it's not accessing to new resources, but it's also how to be more transparent and innovative in developing collaborative and participative approach with their citizens. There is also the Living Lab in Kampala, which is instead of launching a big investment at the city level, we are pushing also to test small scales pilot programs in order to develop the financial, economics, and technical models to prepare the investment. And this lower the risk of investment, but also it allows the city to be sure that they're taking the good decision for the cities in order to prepare the scale-up phase. And then on the collaborative approach, also some cities have developed the local citizens bond, which allow the citizens from a city to buy bonds that will be used to invest into services and infrastructure in the city. So those are a few examples, but I'm sure that we will have much more example with the other participants. So maybe to conclude, some recommendation when we are talking about municipal finance innovation. There is a mindset change that is needed to think from financing local governments to financing with local governments, because cities cannot finance by their own all the different services and infrastructure. And there is a common approach now with donors and with investors to invest into individual projects. But we are thinking more like on a multi-stakeholder cooperation and approach. I think it will help also to engage innovation on finance. The second point is to engage a multi-stakeholders dialogue and cooperation. It's very connected to what I've just said, in order to dialogue with the ministries, but also with the donors, to see how together can we put efforts in mobilizing resources from different sides in the territory. The third one is to encourage peer-to-peer exchange to inspire innovative models. For example, the city of Paris have developed a lot of innovative mechanisms and tools, and the mayors said that she could do that politically because through the C40 UCLG networks, she got inspired by what have been done in other territories. So peer-to-peer, I think, is a crucial also to be innovative. The fourth is to reinforce data collection, because if we are blind on the figures, we cannot try to project sustainable financial strategies. And the last one is to test a small-scale approach in order to reduce the risk of investment and to be sure that the solutions that is identified is a good one for the territory. So I will stop there, and hopefully it will give you some ideas on our reaction for the other speakers. Again, thank you very much, Esther, and happy to be there during the session.
Yeah, many thanks, Jean-Francois. I think it was a perfect presentation to set the scene, already highlighting some of the models we will discuss here today as well as recommending peer-to-peer learning for inspiration, which is exactly the goal of this session. So with this, I would like to move now to our second speaker, Robert Kirchner. Robert from the GIZ site was part of an expert group who I believe designed a very, very exciting tool helping local governments to develop their finance roadmaps in different sectors. But I better stop here and let Robert present all this in details. So Robert, the floor is yours.
Perfect. Now you can hear me, I hope.
Yes, we can.
You see the presentation, right? Perfect. Yeah, very excited to be here. Thanks, Esther, for inviting me. For us, it's a really exciting event because we get to launch our main knowledge product, which has a wonderful name, Finance Roadmaps for Climate Projects. How can local governments in Sub-Saharan Africa facilitate access to finance? Before I present the study, I just wanted to say one or two words about us, the Covenant of Mayors in Sub-Saharan Africa. So we are the regional chapter of the Global Covenant of Mayors, where subnational governments commit to climate action. And we have a bit more than 200 signatories now, and we as GIZ, together with our partners, the AFD Expertise France and the Spanish IS, are supporting signatories on the one hand to prepare climate change plans, but also to foster exchange between cities. And our main focus here is we are the component 3 is really to help city signatories to develop infrastructure projects, and it's also kind of like the scene setter for this publication. Before I go into the details, I also wanted to set a bit the scene for my presentation with a quote about innovation. Jean-François has also had a great quote. Here I have it from a Chinese philosopher who said about innovation, there are not more than 5 musical notes, yet the combination of these 5 give rise to more melodies than can ever be heard. And what I like about the quote is that basically also in finance, you find that there are a lot of like a few basic models where all of the innovation that we see in finance can be derived from. And obviously we thought for our publication is that let's talk a bit more about the musical notes. And the innovation comes a bit later. So you will hear a lot of the melodies in the presentation of the others, but I will focus a bit more on the musical notes, the basics. Here just to present the study with our this is how the publication looks. Maybe a few words about the study that's been prepared by our wonderful colleagues from the Global Clearinghouse on behalf of the GIZ Covenant of Mayors Sub-Saharan Africa, and received wonderful feedback from ICLE Africa, ICLE World Secretariat, CCFLA, REN 21 and CE40 that really helped us to improve the quality. The objective that we set out for our study was really to challenge us to make a study for signatories, to really enable the signatories to accelerate the development of climate projects at the local level. And when we thought about, okay, we want to have a bottom-up study that basically really helps the local administration, we thought the best way how we can achieve that is really to lay out a step-by-step roadmaps that really highlights the proactive steps that signatories can undertake at each step of the project lifecycle to advance climate projects, to really be sure at every step of the way, kind of like what are the things to consider and so on. The largest part of the studies is actually really not just kind of like having a general roadmap, but really looking at 10 specific climate projects. So we're covering everything from integrated waste management to public lighting to even tree planting or cook stoves in the study. Just gave you like things starting with the first musical note. I think what I lined out here was a bit kind of like a rough project development roadmap. Just a few steps that I laid out here from the study is basically the first one. I think important to consider that there is also a public policy process in the local administration where it's very important to be aware of the benefits of the climate projects, also to consider like which project will be prioritized in the end, and to identify already project options. And therefore we have, I think, 2 phases of really assessing these options more than on a rough level, to first assess really the options, assess the affordability, engage with experts to identify and cost technical solutions. Once there's a really rough concept already on the projects, to start engaging with funders to really see how can I fund the project, even if it's this DFIs, if it's a national government and so on. And then on the basis of this outcome to really to demonstrate the feasibility really with the in-depth technical evaluations. I want to give just during the presentation now, just want to give 2 or 3 examples of the kind of added value that we provide along this roadmaps. I think first starting with, and I think this is such a powerful tool to think about, is really the benefits of climate projects. Now what, here we laid out for each climate project really 3 dimensions, which first one, the climate environment benefits, all of these projects, the development benefits, and the specific benefits for local administration, which I think are so crucial to understand also if you have to like discuss this internally to get buy-in for a specific project. I can just say that since we are also starting to support projects, one project we picked recently was a project that was presented to us by the local government as a safety project, so it was on public lighting. And then throughout the discussion we saw, well, the climate options, or the best climate option here, solar lights, might also be the best option in this project. And then once we discussed also the potential savings for the local government, we felt well, like we had a really strong buy-in from the local government to push this project. So it's very, I think, important at the very beginning to think about this kind of benefits. What we did in terms of assessing the options for us, I think we really wanted to present is also the scope and the depth of the decision that needs to take place. And I think here's also a fantastic musical note. Here I just laid out as an example the different finance models and the allocation of roles, so that indeed local administrations understand the kind of options that are on the table, starting with, on the right side, entirely private run model. Yeah, so I think that could also be a solution to say, well, maybe the local administration is not the one pushing the projects, rather maybe somebody else. On the left hand, you see then the other extreme, that would be a model that is completely publicly owned and operated. And then some models in between, if it's a PPP model, or it could be a model where the infrastructure is owned by the city, but the service is run by the private side. And really to lay out here kind of like where are responsibilities, where are also risks in terms of construction, for example, and who's paying the capital cost, who's paying the cost for operating the facility, but to really make sure to understand that. And on top of that, that would be my next slide, is not just to introduce the concept, but also kind of like give proactive steps into finding kind of like the right options for the local administration. So I think what here is very crucial in terms of assessing options. As a first step, to first of all identify which financing models are supported by local legislation and regulations. I think this is such a crucial topic, and I think when you hear about the case studies later, also to think about what are the enabling factors behind being able to issue a bond, for example. Just to come with another example from Cameroon, what we found out that it's not possible to have long-term contracts with private actors. So if I basically go back to the slide before, then I know already, okay, PPPs are not possible because this kind of integrated waste management project will really need to have contracts of 10 to 15 years. So they already fall out. Okay, we're left with 3 options: the private model, the public model, and then the infrastructure and having the private sector operate the model. Then obviously also to look and analyze the available budget of the local administration to allocate it to live up the project, which is like crucial in deciding, do we have the financial resources to do something on our own, or should it be maybe more of a private sector model? And then also to give a bit of an expert guidance for us to evaluate advantages and disadvantages of finance models. Just to, for example, with the integrated waste management, if you have certain recycled products, who is able to actually create a market, who's able to create the demand for buyers to to buy this project, to make the project profitable? Is this more on the public side, or is this more on the private side, to see kind of like how would the access to finance look like under each model? Is it the private sector who is obliged to find the finance, or is it more the public sector? And also to look at, and I think we see that especially with climate technologies who are still rather new, to see kind of like who is able to manage the technological risk of these rather new technologies and making sure they are well operated, right? So basically that's what we were trying to do, is like to lay out options, lay out steps, give expert guidance to provide input. I'll jump over this one. And in the end, the key ingredients of our study really kind of like laying out this proactive steps towards project development for each different climate project. And I think we really covered here a lot of different projects based on the demand of the signatories, from cook stoves to waste to energy, from building efficiency to public lighting, to really introduce the main concepts, yeah, in terms of the financing model, also to give tools to assess the potential funding model, if this is a completely grant-based project, towards I think what would be the most ambitious model that is funded by bonds, for example. And then to provide guidance for local administrations to really give the relevant criteria, the relevant guidance for them. And I think that's for us the main key objective is here for them to make informed decisions if they advance their project, that they are aware which options are on the table, which are the criteria, and based on this really make the decision, why do you choose this over this, because there are certain criteria where we feel stronger for this rather than this one. The study for us will also be the starting point for our next steps. It's like to use the study as a basis for the trainings. So to have very specific trainings for local administrations on specific project types, if this might be public lighting, integrated waste management, and also obviously as a guide for the project support that we will be starting soon. We have chosen first projects. We are starting with the support very soon. And I think all I'm left is basically it's really time to get on the project development road and scale. And I hope the melodies that you will hear with the case study will be very interesting. And I hope I was able to provide you a bit of a background where these innovative finance, which basic concepts are behind them, and kind of like what are the decisions that needs to be taken, because I feel at the end that's what we see from the project support. I think innovation is very much specific to the local context, to find a finance vehicle that fits in the local context, into the enabling environment, but also to the customs on the place. I think if innovation is able to achieve that, we will also achieve the necessary skill. Last slide for me, just to say thank you again once again for the invitation. Here's the link to download the study. I will also just post it into the chat so everybody is able to look at it, download it, and thanks very much once again. And yeah, with this I give up to Esther.
Yeah, many thanks, Robert. I guess it was a lot of information to digest. So, but the document is available online. And I really encourage all of you to read it and share with your colleagues. As I said, we unfortunately have no dedicated Q&A for this part of the agenda. But yes, please feel free to use the question pane. Yeah, also Robert kindly offered that later, if you attend the group discussion, the Africa group discussion, then he will be there and you can ask your questions. But meanwhile, yes, feel free to use the question pane, and then yeah, we collect those questions. So with this, now we are moving to the deeper discussions on the financing tools. And I hand over the facilitation for the panel discussion to Bella Tonkonoji, Associate Director at the Climate Policy Initiative and the Lead Advisor and Manager of the CCFLA Secretariat. Bella, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you so much, Esther, and everybody involved in putting together this panel and full discussion. Thank you so much for the invitation. Really pleased to moderate this coming panel on behalf of the City's Climate Finance Leadership Alliance, which is a coalition of leaders dedicated to mobilizing climate finance for cities at scale by 2030. And we've been working together with many of the organizations on the call, especially ICLE, for a long time, and FMTV, to develop and share knowledge and best practices around innovative financial approaches. So really eager to hear from our speakers today. ICLE has put together a very interesting panel, and thank you, Robert, for providing the bass notes. So let's jump straight into the melodies. We have 4 panelists today. I'll introduce each one in turn, and just to ask speakers to please keep your presentations to about 7 to 8 minutes to keep to our time. So our first panelist is Mr. Ottavio Calumbi. He graduated in law from the Catholic University of Pernambuco and has been part of the current administration of the city of Recife in Brazil since 2014, always working within the Special Projects Office. And in January 2020, he took over as head of the cabinet. So really pleased to hear from you, Ottavio, about your experiences in Recife with multiple solutions for finance in your city. Over to you.
Hi everyone, good morning or good afternoon. I would like to say that it is a great honor to be here with you, sharing those priceless experiences and informations. And I am from Recife, a city in the northeast of Brazil, and I want to focus on 2 representative experiences that we developed here. The first, before we talk about the experiences, I want to register that Recife is the first Brazilian city to adopt a decree declaring about the global climate emergency. It is very significant for us because last year, during the Brazilian Climate Conference on November, our mayor publicized this information, right? The first experience that we believe that is very significant is a crowdfunding platform developed by the municipality. It's called I Want to Impact, in Portuguese, Quero Impactar. And I believe that this title combines with the name of our event, Demo Cities. So I believe that those names match. And it is a partnership between municipality, non-governmental organizations, and private sector, and it helps to fund several social projects. We have child protection projects, sports projects, and environment too. And through this crowdfunding, we built a hospital for elderly. It was inaugurated last week, exactly last Thursday, and the I Want to Impact program founded donations of money and equipment, totalizing almost 3 million reais, or in United States dollars, 600,000. This building is provided with a solar power system. This is the first municipal public building with this resource. And this system was very important to convince the donators. It was the main thing that helped to raise this amount. We have a picture of the hospital, and now a picture of the system. One second experience that we have here is the change our public lights to a LED system. So until December, we will change the whole public lights to this system. It is almost 100,000 of points in investment of 85 million of reais provided by a local tax and a loan with a federal bank. The federal, I am talking about the federal bank, not federal money. The money for this loan was is from the financial market. So we established this negotiation with the bank, and we concluded a loan contract, and we have the expectation of energy efficiency before the program. It's 5.2 gigawatt hour, and after less than 3. The return of investment will be in 5 years, and the warranty of the LED lights is 5 years. So we will have the return before the end of the warranty. So, well, those are the experiences, and I appreciate your attention, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Otávio. Muito obrigada. Really interesting to hear your experiences. I think what stood out to me especially was, you know, in the first case with I want to impact the importance of partnerships, which we also heard from Jean-Francois, and it really stood out to me that you pretty much almost halved your energy usage in lighting with this project. So congratulations to you for that. Let me move on then to our second panelist, Mr. Daniel Sullivan, who is the Manager of Strategic Policy at the City of Cape Town, where he is primarily responsible for the city's finance policy development. In 2018, Daniel facilitated the raising of the City of Cape Town's inaugural green bond. We're really looking forward to hearing your experience with that issuance. Over to you, Daniel.
Thanks, Bella, and good afternoon, evening, sorry, good day, everybody, I should say. Yeah, I'm going to run through the presentation relatively quickly, but I'm hoping that it will be shared on the forum, so if people do need further information, they can dig into it. Sorry, my screen is not working for, there we go. So I've got sort of 3 basic steps in the presentation. It was why did the city pursue a green bond, and then some details on the process, and an indication of some of the benefits that we realized through the bond raising process. So primarily just starting off the why, the City of Cape Town sort of sees itself as a sort of progressively green or carbon aware city. And we have a number of C40 commitments and climate-related commitments. So this, the bond was really seen as from the perspective of we've got a number of projects in the pipeline, we've got a lot of momentum around the green initiatives, particularly sort of adaptation and mitigation projects, and really, you know, how can we bring a financing component or financing discussion to our city around sustainable or green related finance. So and sort of secondary objectives of it were to sort of try and mainstream some of the sustainability credentials, not just in the project delivery and the climate change department in our city or environmental team, but to mainstream that across the rest of the city. And then also considerations around diversifying our funding mix. I mean, traditionally we would have gone for sort of normal loans or even sort of vanilla bonds if we were raising bonds, but this was to try and see how we can bring other investors into the conversation, because at the time, and I think more so now, there's a real appetite for green investments in the private sector, brought on in South Africa in any case by some of our pension fund regulations, which call for sustainability criteria in investments. The process that we went through, and this is where it sort of gets, I've tried to simplify it, but this is the sort of broad process. Initially, we had a sort of green bond framework which we initiated, which we developed to say, you know, this is more or less these are the types of projects that we would like to fund by this bond, and this is the mechanism by which we're going to manage the finance flows in the bond. We then went about, once we had the framework, identifying the types of projects we wanted to invest in. We went through the city's project portfolio, and we've got a very mature project portfolio pipeline in the city where we track all of our projects, and we can assess them from multiple dimensions and look at various criteria of the associated with projects and project outcomes. So we ran a report through, sort of did a sort of analysis of this with a steering committee to try and identify some key projects which met the criteria of our framework. Our framework was built off the climate bond existing taxonomy. So we then assessed our projects against that climate bond initiative, the climate bond initiative taxonomies, to understand sort of whether they could be verified according to this certification. The importance of getting this certification was really to add credibility to our bond issue, because, you know, at the time there were a number of bonds being issued that were self-certified green bonds. We specifically wanted to get something that was externally verified as well, so that it would hold muster in the investor community as well. So climate bond initiatives sort of came up as one of the emergent green bond or climate bond certifiers. So using their taxonomy made sense for us. We then appointed assurance providers to, again, sort of check the work that had been done by the team and verified against the standard. And we got their opinion, which basically at that point said that, you know, it seemed appropriate and seemed that we had identified the correct projects and gone through the right procedures to get certified by the CBI. That then got submitted to the CBI, who then gave us a pre-issuance certificate. We then went through the issuance process, and we got our, after issuance, we got a post-issuance assurance, which really was just a verification check to say what we said that we'd do at this point was actually done at the raising point. What we did in parallel to this process was we also, Moody's were developing a green bond measure, and we got an external opinion from Moody's on our green bond, and they gave us, based on not just the certification process that we went through with the CBI, but the city's general financial health, they gave us a green bond excellent rating, which was another thing that we could hold up to future investors or potential investors to encourage them to look at the bond. At the raising of the actual bond, we had a transactional advisor support that. So that was the listing on our stock exchange and the actual auction process that they facilitated. We also had a number of roadshows, and these roadshows were not just useful from an investor's perspective to expose them to the City of Cape Town and what we have in terms of projects and green potential investments, but it was also useful from our political leadership and our financial leadership to go and start speaking to investors about what sort of things they're interested in investing in. So there's a lot of information, not just in the bond, but around bond and green finance that we were able to sort of discuss with investors. And then, yeah, this point was just once we issued the bond, we allocated the funding to the necessary projects, and we continue to track them and track the projects and the implementation to this day, actually. And that's what we do within our reporting. So the reporting goes into our annual financial statements so that we can see that the projects are in place, and investors are confident that their money has gone towards the green projects that were identified in the framework. In terms of the actual identified projects, and this snapshot here is really just the climate bonds taxonomy, which helped us sort of classify the types of projects that we had and align them to the standards. What we did is we looked through our MTRIP, that's our medium-term financial accounts, which is a 3-year cycle of projects that we look at. And we identified key projects that were being funded or had been funded, so that we could refinance them or finance them with green bond proceeds. It was important for us and maybe this is the trick, bonds, if we look at different financial instruments, they are used for different purposes. So a bond, from our perspective, we didn't want to raise a bond and not have projects that we could immediately invest in, because then we would have had to keep the money that we raised from the bond in some sort of saving account, and only apply it to the projects when the project spent. So we primarily looked at things within our MTRIP that had spent or were on the cusp of spending significant amounts of money, so that we didn't have to hold the money and pay for it or pay the bond fees while the money just sat in the bank account. So a bond is really in the same way as you take out a bond for your home and you want your home to be habitable. A green bond or a bond would be the same mechanism or same type of finance that we look at. So we had to make sure that those projects were very close to delivered and refinance them, so they weren't project financing. And then the revenue sources for the bond or to pay the bond off were off our rates base most primarily, because most of the projects that we identified were rates funded projects. So there was a source of income to offset the bond costs and pay them off. So as I mentioned, we assessed against the standards. But in terms of the projects that we had in the city, we had a lot of water-related projects, and I just want to, for those who may be not aware of Cape Town's trials over the last few years, at the period that we raised the bond, we had a significant water crisis in Cape Town. So a lot of the projects that we were delivering on a capital intensive way were related to water losses and shoring up our water supply. We also had projects around flood defenses, which sounds ironic that we're looking at water and flood, but the flood is coastal and it's not drinkable water. But we also had flash flood instances where water may not be filling up our dams, but it's still going through our rivers. We funded a seawall project and a few energy efficiency or mitigation projects. Those were also mostly to do with replacement of pumps at water pumping stations. So the energy saving of a more efficient pump that went into the system. And then in terms of the bond issuance,
Daniel, sorry to interrupt, just one more minute, if that's all right. Okay. Thank you so much.
I think people can read this. People can read through this, and as I say, this presentation will hopefully be shared. But there were financial savings. Yes, we saw a potential. It's debatable whether we've seen a sort of green premium that we got, but there was a strong market appetite for our bond. And it seemed to have been, it certainly was something that our finance team were happy with. But then the non-financial benefits I sort of talked about at the beginning, about sort of encouraging a broader conversation around green projects and green finance. So bringing those criteria and those levels of assessment of projects right to the beginning, so that we can, at some point in the future, we have a whole mix of projects that can be funded through green bonds going forward as well. And these were just something in there for information in terms of the cost of raising the bond, mostly around the consultant costs and the time that people dedicated to identifying projects, etc. And then the key lesson is sort of maintaining the high credit rating was core for Cape Town, having the project pipeline in place from the beginning. So a bond, you need the project pipeline to start off with. You can't raise a bond and then hope to develop projects. And then the project tracking and information system. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Daniel. This is probably one of the clearest, best presentations of a green bond I've seen. I really appreciate those kinds of details. And I think many people working with cities, that's exactly the kind of information that they want to know. So I'm certainly looking forward to also poring over the presentation after the discussion today. So let me then now move on to our third panelist, Dr. Vangelis Marinakis from the National Technical University of Athens. He's an electrical and computer engineer with extensive experience in decision support systems for intelligent energy management and sustainable energy planning, and will be speaking to us about some of the work that he is doing around innovative finance and crowdfunding for poverty alleviation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Greetings from Greece, Athens. The idea is to present a few things about energy poverty and the need for financing. As you may know, energy poverty is also one of the main pillars for the Covenant of Mayors, since cities and regions commit to provide access to secure, sustainable, and affordable energy for all. So, energy poverty is linked to the low household income, the high energy cost, and the energy inefficient homes, and also it is known to have several impacts to the health of the citizens. In these slides, we can see some key figures about the status of energy poverty in Europe. And until now, the conventional ways of financing energy poverty are mainly based on social allowances, regulations that avoid disconnections or other subsidies. So all these are not sustainable, and also citizens do not participate actively in the energy transition. In this context, PowerPool is a European project funded by Horizon 2020 program, and the aim is to support and empower energy poor citizens through joint energy initiatives. Our lab, NTUA, is the leader of this project, and we are a consortium of 14 partners across Europe, including, of course, ICLEI, for the capacity building and the overall exploitation of the project, but also a number of countries as pilot countries, which are highlighted by the highest energy poverty levels in Europe. And the idea is to create, to design and develop some support programs for energy poor citizens in order to facilitate behavioral change and other energy efficiency and renewable energy actions, coupled with appropriate financing schemes like energy cooperatives or crowdfunding campaigns and more. These activities will be implemented, for instance, by representatives from the city authorities, who will be able to participate in PowerPool, trained and become energy supporters or energy communities mentors, or even create some energy poverty offices within the structure of the cities. We will also develop guidelines to support local planning, especially during the development of the sustainable energy and climate action plans, cities to be able to include also this dimension of energy poverty in their planning and identify appropriate financing opportunities. Some indicative ideas are summarized in this slide. For instance, we can have an energy cooperative which collect donations through the energy bills of their members or through a crowdfunding platform in order to support local actions that address energy poverty. Or we can have an energy cooperative which rent the roofs of socially based institutions for implementing PV projects, providing them with extra income, and also supporting energy poor citizens through lower or predefined electricity prices. Other examples in Europe, and especially Croatia, is a crowdfunding project financed by citizens in order to support the energy transition of Krzyzewski city in Croatia. It helped the municipality to build a rooftop PV power plant, delivering benefits for citizens, the local economy, or even the environment. The first phase of the project started with a fundraising campaign, which include 53 investors with an average investment of 500 euro, raising a total of 31,000 euro for the installation of the PV project. Then the campaign managed to collect the total amount of money in only 10 days, and a follow-up campaign was launched in order to collect 23,000 additional euro for the completion of the project, which was raised in only 2 days. So the cooperative responsible for this project works in close collaboration with the municipality, involving citizens with micro loans and paying them back with a fixed interest rate. Another project in a larger scale is in Portugal through Copernico, also a partner of PowerPool project, where they achieved to engage more than 300 investors the last years, implementing around 2 megawatt project installation. So there is the potential for these ideas, for these projects that can engage citizens, can attract their interest through different ways, through crowdfunding campaigns, through the creation of energy cooperatives, and they can support local actions that address energy poverty. Of course, other ideas are also available in a special issue which was published 2 months ago and collect more than 10 papers speaking about different ideas, different ways, different schemes to alleviate and fund actions about energy poverty. So thank you for this short introduction. Of course, you can also follow PowerPool. This will be the link of the project. Now is under construction since this project started in September 2020. But of course, you can also follow the social media accounts for the upcoming, for all the news about this project and activities in terms of the engagement of cities in the project, and of course, the implementation of local actions like the examples we mentioned before in the pilot countries. So thank you very much. I hope that I keep the time for the presentation.
You did wonderfully. Thank you so much, Vangelis. And really just a reminder, you know, with the pandemic in particular, has hit hardest the poorest and vulnerable communities in our cities, and seeing this kind of initiative that really shows a way to support those communities moving forward with the green transition is really, really exceptional. So thank you so much for sharing that, and congratulations on all of your great work there. Let me turn to our final panelist, Ms. Christine Knapp, who is the director of the City of Philadelphia's Office of Sustainability, where she leads the city's climate change efforts to help create a healthy and sustainable city for all Philadelphians. So thanks, Christine. Look forward to hearing from you about your experiences with energy performance contracting. Over to you.
Great, thank you. Can you see my screen? Excellent.
Yes, so, if you could just start the slideshow, then we'll be able to see it a little better.
Is that all right? Better? Okay.
Yes, that's
so thank you, and well, good morning from here in Philadelphia. As noted, I'm Christine Knapp. I'm the director of the city's Office of Sustainability. The Office of Sustainability is charged with implementing Greenworks, Philadelphia's sustainability plan, which covers these key 8 vision areas that I won't go into, but just wanted to share as sort of our baseline work. Our mayor, Jim Kenney, like many mayors around the world, has committed to staying and towards meeting the goals of the Paris Climate Agreement, even though our federal administration has said that they do not, and they plan to leave the Paris Climate Agreement if they get reelected. We in Philadelphia see climate change as both a multiplier of risks and of opportunities. And we believe that if we can get proactive and address climate change head on, it's an opportunity for us to thrive in the future. But if we don't, there's many risks that it can bring for our city. A little bit of snapshot of our carbon footprint. You can see basically our buildings and industry are responsible for 72% of our carbon footprint locally. So as we're working to address our carbon footprint, that is a large area of our focus is in our built environment. We in fact put out 2 papers around the built environment. One called Powering Our Future is a citywide sort of scope with the 2050 goal to how to reduce carbon emissions 80% by 2050. At the time we were sort of writing it and researching it, the 80 by 50 was our goal. I think we now know we need to go faster and harder, but that's what the baseline that we had at the time. The other is our municipal energy master plan for our built environment. So essentially what the city government itself owns and manages. That sets a shorter timeline to 2030 and sets 4 specific goals for how we can sort of lead by example in city government and manage our own built environment better. So we want to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 50%, cut energy use by 20%, move to 100% renewable electricity, and do all of that while either maintaining or reducing our costs, which is quite the challenge. And that's where innovative finance has come in to help us achieve those goals. Just a quick, again, snapshot to give you a sense of where we are. Electricity is our sort of largest cost within energy use. You can also see, as several other folks have mentioned, street lighting for us on the right-hand side is a large chunk of our use. So that is on our agenda to get done. As most folks would know on here, we have 2 major sort of pathways to meet these goals. One is to lower our energy use. We have a variety of different opportunities to do that, and some of those are bulleted out here. I'm going to focus in on energy performance contracts that have been a really helpful mechanism for us. The first time we used energy performance contract was what we call the quadplex, which is 4 city-owned office buildings sort of in the heart of our city. We were able to use a state enabling act called Guaranteed Energy Savings Act that allows municipalities to work with energy service companies or ESCOs and to use third-party financing, which we did end up floating a bond to be able to invest in these buildings. We have had a private project developer, and we end up saving about $1.5 million a year after the project completion. The clock tower you see in City Hall is sort of iconic in Philadelphia. That tower is lit up at night, and just swapping out those light bulbs with LEDs saved us $10,000 a year, which is always surprising to folks that just one tower could make such a difference in our costs. We use the same service for the Philadelphia Museum of Art. Anyone who's ever seen the Rocky movie may know these steps that Rocky ran up at the end of his run. We actually own this building as the city of Philadelphia, and it's very old, it's very big, and the art is there 24/7, which means that we have to be keeping it temperature controlled and humidity controlled. So it's very energy intensive building. Similarly, we have worked with a third party called Johnson Controls to invest $11 million for upgrades to, again, lighting, system improvements, et cetera. This project is just coming to completion now, so we don't have numbers just yet on sort of total savings, but we also, through this project, we're able to demonstrate job creation, as we did with the Quadplex as well, which was a really important part of the mayor's goal. And then on the other side of the other way we meet our goals is by moving to cleaner energy. And we don't have as many choices here, but we did find one really successful project for the city of Philadelphia, which is a power purchase agreement. We pursued this because we thought it would be a great way for us to show leadership, but it also fit in nicely with our existing energy procurement strategies, and had some economic opportunity for Philadelphia and for the region that we were really interested in as well. Again, this fits in with our purchasing approach to sort of be hedging in advance, to be balancing sort of price and stability with sustainability and other goals. We put out a RFP. We ended up selecting a project called Adams Solar, which is located about an hour and a half, 2 hours from Philadelphia. Over 70 megawatt facility will be built for Philadelphia there by originally developed by an organization called Community Energy, later purchased by ENGIE. It's a 20-year contract that we lock into with today's prices for electricity. So we believe over time, as electricity prices go up, we'll save money from having locked in today's prices. We will not actually pay anything for the construction maintenance of this facility. We will simply be buying the electricity that's produced by it at a cost of about $6 million a year, which is basically what we pay today for non-renewable electricity off of the grid. So that is just a quick snapshot of a couple of different ways that we've been able to use some innovative financing to meet some of our municipal energy goals, and happy to talk more in the chat for questions.
Thanks so much, Christine. Really great to hear just some really concrete examples and to see those awesome results, especially in the City Hall there, which I'm very well familiar with. So really nice to know that about City Hall. So that concludes the panel section of our discussion today. So big thank you to our 4 panelists for sharing your very impressive experiences. There are questions in the chat, so we will be moving into the breakout groups, and that's where you'll be able to discuss further those questions. So let me turn it back over to Esther to take us forward. Thanks so much.
Yes, thank you so much, and many thanks, Bella, for the great facilitation, and of course also the speakers for the very inspiring presentations. And I'm so happy to see all the questions coming. We will try to address them, and yeah, now we are moving to the group discussions, which is technically a very exciting part as well for me. So you will have the opportunity to choose the group, the breakout room you want to join and you want to be. So each speaker who just now presented will be in one of these groups. So one group will be on public-private partnership. This is where you will have Octavio Calumbi, the speaker from Recife. Then the group 2 will be on green bonds. This is where you will have Daniel Sullivan from the Cape Town green bonds. And then the group 3 on energy communities, building on the presentation you heard on energy poverty alleviation from Vangelis. And then group 4 will be on energy performance contracting, which was the presentation Christina just made. So I hope it will all work out great, and we will have 30 minutes for the group discussions. And here it's really very strict, so you will see the timer, 30 minutes, and when the 30 minutes is over, then we automatically will get back together in the main room. So now Patricia or Ayan, I don't know who will help me with breaking in the rooms, but we can start. I guess we are all back again. Yeah, I hope you had good discussions. I had the privilege to join different groups, so I was jumping from one group to the other, and yeah, it was very exciting. And now it's time that we share the main outcomes. And I would like to invite the facilitators to share briefly the results of their group discussions. We have just a very little time for that, so I ask you to summarize it in a few minutes. So shall we start with the group public-private partnership? Ms. Tapia, can you please summarize briefly your discussions?
Sure. Our discussion obviously was about the public-private partnerships and the importance of trying to bring in private sector investment, given obviously the amount of resources needed to fight or to finance solutions for climate action at the local level. It is important that these private partnerships show transparency in the use of public resources, and we also talk about a little bit more about besides finding financial models to bring private sector capital. It is also important to work on the upstream planning on how to prioritize urban infrastructure, incorporating sustainability indicators to better prioritize the investments that's going to be financed by the local governments.
Perfect, thank you. And yeah, not to waste too much time, let's move to the second group on green bonds.
Thank you very much, Esther. So we had some interesting discussions, firstly on the costs around the green bonds issuance. And actually, Daniel reflected that the costs are relatively minimal, the external costs, but rather that it was the internal staff time that was spent on preparing the project list, which is a kind of unaccounted for cost to some extent. But if it was counted, that would have been a relatively significant cost. We also had a discussion around, not just looking at the green bond, but what made it successful in Cape Town is the enabling environment, and especially around project portfolio management systems that are in place, both in terms of project identification, but also in terms of project tracking. And that has proved to be critical to the success of this green bond and managing it going forward. Another interesting discussion was around the scale of projects, and that there was a range of scales, and that the green bond did allow for financing of also a range of different types of projects, both adaptation, kind of mainly they were around climate adaptation projects, but there were of course some mitigation projects, and we're always looking for innovative ways to finance adaptation here in Africa. But we're not going to go for the very small projects because each project requires some level of accreditation in and of itself. There was also an important question around, are green bonds the right financial instrument for you? And it's really, and your city, and it's really about interrogating that with quite a lot of thought given to the way a bond actually works and the need to have, they work really well for refinancing of projects that have existing revenue streams. And also the type of bond selected. It's not a green bond, it's just not just one thing. You also, as to when the money is released, and that will also affect how the money is then used. So City of Cape Town got kind of a big tranche of money up front and needed to spend that very quickly. So again, project refinancing was a better solution. Another key point on the success of the green bond in Cape Town was around the rate space as a key revenue stream. So particularly projects were selected. Actually, one of the criteria used was to look for projects that were being funded off the rate space and not to look for projects currently being funded by tariffs or grants. So that also means that it allows the city to free up some of their capital for other projects through receiving the finance from these green bonds. And in the final one of the final points is that really a project needs to be kind of financially viable in its own right, go through that lens, and then go through the climate lens. So you can't kind of just aggregate projects that in and of themselves are not financially viable. Overall, very good discussion, and thank you to everyone for joining us there.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thank you, Rebecca, summarizing this. Shall we move to the third group, which was on energy communities? Jonas, Mr. Fleer?
Yes, give me a second. Okay, we have summarized our points in a slide. I hope you can see it all now.
We can see it.
Okay, great. So it was a very interesting discussion actually in our group. First of all, we said, okay, we discussed two different things. First of all was like energy poverty as a general topic, and the other hand, also crowd investing as a general financing mechanism. We came up with some critical points and also some lessons learned and recommendations. So first of all, crowd investing, we saw it as a financial mechanism that can actually finance energy poverty, as we have seen, for example, in the case study as well. But on the other hand, we are also a bit skeptical because we think also that the current COVID-19 situation might also have an impact on crowd investing initiatives as economies are going down in several regions of the world. And since it's basically crowd investing is basically from retail investors' money or private money, so that they might not be willing to invest. But on the other hand, also due to the largest developments with the new Green Deal by the EU, we see also that there might also be the other trend on the other way around. Yes, in general, for crowd investing, we saw there's a lot of challenges as well, such as knowledge, because people don't know actually how this financing mechanism works. We saw a lot of regulatory issues as well, because in each country there are still different regulations with regard to this financial mechanism, and as well as some skepticism as well. But on the other hand, we see that financing energy efficiency is can actually also be part of energy poverty alleviation. And we saw it also that it's very important actually to identify or to map energy poverty citizens, so that you actually know where you can tackle or where you can intervene with new projects. And last but not least, in terms of critical points, we see that energy poverty or energy access is it's really a global problem, and not only in Europe, as we have seen, for example, in the case study. Regarding the lessons learned and recommendations, we see that there are also a lot of opportunities for this financing mechanism, especially if there are local and regional governments involved. And as we have seen, especially in this kind of project that we have seen in Croatia with the solar rooftop installments. On the other hand, we see that including the private sector and these utilities, like in this multi-stakeholder process, it's very beneficial in this kind of setup, because it also not only has it creates a mutual understanding, but also on the other hand increases also the acceptance in the community and also in the cities. It's very important to use data. In this case, for example, energy bills, social info, etc., would also be key to identify the energy poor who really needs access to energy. And yes, and this is the next point I already said, that it's very important that we have involved different actors, such as NGOs as well, local companies, with the overall aim to raise awareness of these mechanisms, that they're very fruitful. And as we have seen it in the example, that only in 2 days, this amount of the necessary amount for the project has been reached, shows in this direction as well. Last but not least, I also quickly wanted to share with you that
Jonas, you were muted for a second.
Yes, I saw it. I was somehow.
I heard you until I wanted to share.
Okay. So last but not least, my last point was that also wanted to make you aware that also at Frankfurt School of Finance Management, we also recently launched a platform which is called Frankfurt Green, where we also do crowd investing, especially in sub-Saharan African countries for green projects. Thank you.
Maybe Jonas, you can even add this link, in the question pane, that the others can also see that.
Yes, sure.
I think it's very useful. Thank you so much. Yes, and now moving to the fourth group on energy performance contracting, I now invite Paul to present the results of that group discussion.
Great, thank you, Esther, and thanks everybody. So the Group 4 discussion focused on energy performance contracting. A few critical points. Really, internal coordination is key, as Christine, our speaker, noted. energy performance contracting typically involves various different local government agencies. She had mentioned her Office of Sustainability, the State Treasurer's Office. And so really making sure that you coordinate with those offices on the front end, get all of your ducks in a row before pursuing the project was vitally important. In order to do that and gain the internal buy-in that's really necessary from decision makers, there's a few key points that folks can focus on. Obviously, achieving climate goals is very compelling, as is the energy savings. But one argument that can be overlooked is deferred maintenance needs. Obviously, a lot of governments, state governments, and even federal government, we have ailing infrastructure needs, and there can be a lot of benefits by addressing those ailing infrastructure needs and obviously achieving your clean transition goals at the same time. The performance guarantee of energy performance contracting is really important to securing affordable capital. So again, with this model, you essentially have an energy service company coming in and guaranteeing the energy savings of the project. That guarantee is a really compelling argument for a lender to participate in the projects. In Philadelphia's case, they floated a bond. The performance guarantee likely led to a really affordable interest rate on that bond issuance. And then lastly, finding the right partners is really key. Because of this performance guarantee, you have to make sure that you are working with a partner that has a strong balance sheet and the financial and technical chops to be able to really deliver on that guarantee. And Christine, I think, made a few really great points in terms of how you can make sure that you find the right partners. It was really interesting. They took an approach. One was issuing a request for qualifications before moving to a request for proposals. The request for qualifications helped weed out a subset of individuals that they then invited to submit requests for proposals. The reason that was given was that one of the buildings, there was a high security clearance required, and obviously they didn't want to release sensitive information to a very large group of individuals, so the request for qualifications helped weed down the number of folks that could actually receive that information. And then just moving quickly to lessons learned and recommendations. One, I think, at the risk of stating the obvious, the first project is the most difficult. So don't be deterred, and document lessons learned and successes so that you can then be in a better position to make the second project far easier and smoother. I think another one that I think is compelling is multiple goals can be achieved through these projects. So obviously we need to be laser focused on climate change right now and our climate impact. But you can also, through your procurement process, make sure that you're working with individuals or companies that will subcontract to minority and women-owned businesses. There are other social goals that you can achieve by pursuing these clean projects. And so making sure as you're structuring your project, having some of these other social goals in mind as you're structuring the project on the front end can help you achieve quite a few different public goals. And then two last ones. When you incur roadblocks, get creative and develop workarounds. So it was noted with an energy performance contract, you're entering into a long-term contract. And from a government perspective, that can be challenging. And Philadelphia had an innovative workaround by setting up a new unique finance authority that was able to overcome that. And then lastly, learn from others and replicate. There's no use recreating the wheel. Definitely be a student in this area and learn from other cities and countries and towns. And when you see things that are working well, steal them and bring them to your area so that we can more quickly transition to clean economies.
Thank you, Paul. And I think it was even a great closing remark, learn from others. And yeah, that's how we tried to put together the program today and also invite the participants that exactly, yeah, learn from each other, inspire each other. There are already a lot of really good examples out there. So also, as I hope this communication will continue beyond this workshop, As we said, we will share the recording of this event today, so it will be available for all, also the presentations. And as you can see, there is always an email address at the end of the presentation on the last slide. So it's up to you. I truly encourage you to continue these discussions and ask questions. Of course, we at ICLEI are also happy to facilitate those communications and reach out. And capacity building is one of our major activities. So we will, of course, continue all that. And the Daring City just started, so we have more than 2 more weeks to go. Super interesting sessions. Please check out the website. There will be also 1 more session on finance, which is more a training session, but you are all welcome to join. It will be on project pitching on the 27th of October, where 8 projects we already work together with can do their pitch in front of a jury and in front of the group, and then we will evaluate it together and give recommendations how to make a perfect pitch and develop their concept. So I invite you to that, but check out the website. There are really super interesting events to come in the next 2 weeks. And I owe you with 1 more apology, because I thought that you can choose to which breakout group you want to go, but it turned out that no, it was done randomly. But as I said, yeah, there are the contacts. We are also happy to facilitate the discussions. So if you ended up in another group you wanted to be, we are very happy to make those linkages and make sure that you get the answers for all your questions you wanted to ask in the group you didn't manage to get to. With that, I see that it's already 5 o'clock. So thanks a lot for everyone. Thanks for the speakers, the facilitators, and of course for all the participants. Thanks for all your questions. We will check again what we received in the question pane. And if something remained unanswered, we will also come back to you. So with that, I close this event. Thank you again, and I wish you a good afternoon, a good evening. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.